My bones felt like they shattered February 1st, 2019. That was the day my husband moved out. And I felt like it was shattering because I'd met him 22 years earlier on an airplane. And I was 30 years old, and I've been waiting a long ass time to meet my man. And we sat on the airplane, and I looked in his eyes, and we started talking. And it was the first time I locked eyes with another human being where I felt at home. I was like, oh my gosh, you're the guy. I've been waiting for you for 30 years. I'm so happy you're here. I just had all these big emotions, and I'd never experienced that before. Um, so we were together ever since that night from the airplane. We got engaged 9 months later. We got married 9 months after that. And we have 5 kids together. But of course, for us, because we're both a bit unusual, it was in an unusual way. With my first pregnancy with my son, Charlie, I started hemorrhaging, and they took me to the hospital, and they C-sectioned my son out, and they said, you have a healthy baby boy. And I was like, Dave, go follow him, because I heard that they swap babies. And they were like, no, you need to stay with her. And so Dave stayed with me, and 3 hours later, and 7 pints of blood transfused, they said, we got to take your uterus out because we got your blood to clot, but you're still losing blood from there. I was like, take it out, because it was just a horrible experience. So anyway, a year later, David and I were looking into adopting, and our doctor said, I left your ovaries, so you can take your eggs and David's man juice, as I like to call it, make embryos and incubate them in someone else's body. Now, this was a trip because this was 20 years ago, and only Joan London had done it. But Dave took out a mortgage, and we did it. We made embryos, and 2 women carried my next 4 children. Everything for Dave and I has been very interesting, and you hear stories about people get married and their kids are so awesome and everything's blah, but I found out that is just so not true, because we looked super awesome on the outside. We have a beautiful family, all of this, but there's of course chaos going on the inside. Our 5 kids are so unique and different, and a few of them have struggles. And when you have a kid that's just gets along easy and goes along easy, it's still a lot to parent. But then when you have 3 with kind of struggles, it's taxing on them, on you and your marriage. But David and I were able to work together and navigate it to take care of our kids, and which is pretty awesome because it was pretty stressful. Something I love about David is that he makes me laugh. He makes me laugh my ass off. When I met him on that airplane, I didn't know that he was on Saturday Night Live, but the first time I saw him, because I didn't watch that show, but the first time I saw him was in Beer Shark Mice. He was in a show with a bunch of guys in Chicago, and they all moved to LA, and they did this improv group together, and it was magical. And I would go every Saturday night and watch him before we were married, after we were married, after we had a bunch of kids, and just laugh my ass off and cry. It's like, I love those guys so much, and David just cracked me up. And after we were married for a while, he was doing a show called The Naked Trucker and T-Bones, and he has this amazing character named T-Bones, and he would get up on stage. You know, we would have a fight or something, and we'd not speak the whole way to watch him perform. And then I'd get in my booth and get my cocktail, and then he'd stand up there and be like doing his thing and rubbing his belly, and I would just start crying, laughing. And it was so wonderful because I could go back to remembering why I loved him in the first place and what a great person he was when I got to get out of the craziness of home or fighting about stuff. So I held this belief my whole life that when you met someone and you got married, you stayed together forever. Now, I got this belief from my father, who stayed with my mother. She was mentally ill, and I was always like, that's not what God meant, Dad. When he said stay together, you guys aren't a couple. She needs help. So anyway, I still held that belief, and I found when I thought about other couples, I'm like, oh, they just didn't try hard enough. That was kind of my thinking. And then I have found over time that every single thing I have judgment about, God gives me a situation to let me experience it so I can see the other side. So I'm going to, after this kind of divorce thing I'm going through right now, I'm not going to judge anyone for anything because I'm done learning my lessons. But I got my master's in spiritual psychology a few years back. And it was unbelievable because I learned how to stop my crazy spinning brain. I learned how to stand guard of what went in my mind, and I only let positive things in, and friends who were toxic or relationships that were toxic organically fell away as I kept on the spiritual path. And I remember going up and I kept evolving and looking down at David and going, get up here. It's amazing up here. And he was like, not interested in your spiritual bullshit. And I just kept going. And our relationship got rocky about 6 years ago. But when you're in something so deep that it's like gray matter, you're not clear on what's happening. You're just in it. And I just remember trying so hard to keep everyone together and make everything work and da 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 da. And then all of a sudden I looked and David was down. I couldn't see him. And I looked down, I was like, David, I used to say, get up here and join me. But I couldn't see him literally, like he had gone down a hole. And the last few years of our marriage, I just felt like I was reaching up and trying to pull someone up who didn't want to be pulled up. But I had to exhaust myself till I finally got it. My thoughts about marriage now are that you can't be in a marriage, in a real partnership and joy and happiness if someone has sat down, because you're no longer in partnership. You're no longer moving forward together. You're no longer equally yoked, if you will. So that's shifted for me. And although this thought in my head that we have to stay together forever because that's what, I had to let that go and go, no, he's out. In 2019, he's out. And I remember when he left that day, I was on the couch crying, like balled up in the guest house crying. We had just built a podcast set to do together, a podcast called Double Date with the Koechners, and we're going to interview celebrity couples. And I was laying on the podcast couch and just bawling. And I've been bawling for the last 5 years. I really felt all the pain that was going down. And I remember, I think I'm cried out. Like, I think I've let all the pain pass through me. And I sat up, put my feet on the ground, and then I stood up. And I looked down at the foundation of what I thought my life was built on, being David Koechner's wife, and it was gone. But then I noticed my feet planted firmly on the ground. And I touched my knees and I came up to my thighs and my midsection, my shoulders and my head. And I looked up and I go, oh, I'm still standing. God, what do you have planned for me? What do you have planned that I couldn't have done if I stayed as David Koechner's wife? So I feel like this big opening happened for me where my thought was gone, but I was still standing and it was empowering. And I realized that David's unconditional love set me on my healing path in life because I was really guarded and partying hard and wild, but his unconditional love allowed me to start to heal. And then his unconditional love catapulted me forward when it was time for me to go, onto my own path. And so from a spiritual perspective, I'm so grateful to David. I love him with all of my heart, and I will forever, just in a new way now. And I want to thank, deep gratitude for David, and I'm in deep gratitude for the universe having my back, even though when I fought because I didn't want it to happen, it happened. And now I can see that it is for my upliftment and growth. And I'm in gratitude for you guys for listening today and for Christine for having me.